exercise with Dr. Muktananda. And then he's going to give a lecture called Sustainable Mental Health and AI, talking about how artificial intelligence can support sustainable mental health systems. That'll be followed by Dr. Prema Kothandaraman, who's a urogynecologist at the Women's Health Excellence Center. And she's going to talk about women's mental health issues. Then Dr. Patel, who's a psychiatrist who's representing KAILASA Los Angeles and also practicing in the community, who's going to talk about mental health and children's issues. Really, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, enhancing mental health will really help assist in achieving almost all of them. So we feel strongly that the work that we have and what we're bringing forth can help the UN achieve its goals and really bring a lot of positive mental health and well-being globally. So we think it's very perfectly aligned with this summit, and we're extremely grateful to the UN General Assembly for organizing this and for having us here. Just a couple estimates, 2.5 to 5 trillion US dollars annual cost of mental health. That's looking at direct costs of clinical care and hospitalization, as well as indirect costs of lost
field. Really appreciate it. And thank you for inviting us to participate in this session. We wanted to give a sense of what we mean by mental health.
Today is going to focus on the long term, right? So there are three aspects to mental health. One is treating after the problem has happened, but two important parts of it are being preventative and also enhancing mental health. We'll talk about it briefly. Mental health is one of the greatest challenges of our time. Close to 1 billion people are affected worldwide, and this is from 2019, and all very much focused on treatment, which is after the fact and super expensive. And it tends to focus on emotional, psychological, and social aspects of mental health. Like emotional means, can we handle stress and emotions? Can we handle anxiety? Psychological is, can we change the thoughts to control thoughts? Maybe think of happier things. It's more like positive thinking. And social is, can we manage jobs and relationships? Can we manage the environment around us? To be truly sustainable, which is what this session is about, I think that traditional approaches have to be sustained with holistic approaches, which are not usually identified. More about this in a bit. And finally, instead of thinking of mental health as just maintaining and managing the jobs and relationship, think of it as a spiritual quest, right? Realizing our peak potential, that is really what will unleash the happiness within us. Next slide, please. I just wanted to go through some data. Next slide, please. See, powerful cognitions go beyond positive thinking. They go towards transforming our beliefs. Many of us tend to grow up with very limited view of ourselves, not due to our own faults. It's because the world, imagine in a school, a teacher evaluates students. They only have a single way of evaluating students based on their own rubric. If a student doesn't fit into that rubric, then the student is graded low, and then the student grows up thinking that they don't have great potential, although they may be extraordinary in doing certain things that no one else can, right? That is what I mean by growing up with beliefs that are self-limiting. So we are spiritual beings enjoying a human experience. If you look at yourself that way as a spiritual being, then you don't think of yourself as being limited by your humanness, but actually liberated by your humanness. So it's a different way of looking at yourself. Next slide. Great. I'm going to now hand it over to Dr. Peter Bloomfield, and he's going to...
And we invite you guys to look into it further. Then the chancellor of KAILASA's Nityananda Hindu University, this is, a being we could talk about all day, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, who is, as per Hinduism, he is an incarnation of Paramashiva, which is the primordial divinity. And starting from birth as a yogi, he has achieved high consciousness and enlightenment and incarnation status to their members in the communities around them, including Andaran, giving food, growing agriculture, healing services, schooling. And then he's literally millions and millions of followers, over 1 million letters of commendation and recognition from political leaders, religious leaders, and is a very, very indescribably remarkable figure. And through this talk, I'll be referring to consciousness. So some of the programs that have been brought by Swamiji are going to have tremendous effects at the cellular and physiologic level. And then I'll be talking about those researches that have been done and then how it shows up in the mental health of participants, which you'll see some remarkable findings. And then we're going to talk about what is going on in the mind. Some of them would have already been part of this enlightenment ecosystem, would have already known Swamiji, and some of them would have been new. And so the Dr. Rao, he drew blood and measured gene expression before and after the program. And they looked at hundreds of different genes being expressed, and they found huge changes in gene expression in multiple pathways. But the ones I'm going to highlight here are the pro-inflammatory pathways, which create inflammation in the system, which will, at the cellular level, be inflammation, but at the system-wide level will show up as stress and disease. Many of these pro-inflammatory pathways were downregulated. And when I say downregulated, advances in aging. The follow-up study was published in a journal called the Journal of Stem Cells. And based on the first study, they said, let's look at telomerase activity, and let's look at peripheral blood stem cells. Telomerase is an enzyme that works to keep the cell genetically young. And many people know about telomeres. It's been very much talked about in the mainstream recently. The telomeres are the organelles inside the cell that create power for the cell, energy for the cell. And so their metabolism was increased. This is actually not a typo. So you would expect that to show up in a massive surge of energy. So when you put together at the cellular level a huge surge in energy, combine that with anti-aging, rejuvenation, and then reduction in stress. Now we looked at how does that show up at the level of the person's mental health. So this was a study that was done a couple years ago, and it's being put into manuscript right now. There was another mind-body therapeutic program. This was called Pranayama Shivoham, and we'll show you at the end. It is available online. But again, it's completely organized and run and attended by our Swamiji, and done through teleconferencing, just much like how this meeting is going right now. So we looked at 4 different scales associated with mental health. One is the DASS, which stands for Depression, Anxiety, Stress Scale. For the depression score, anything above 10 means depression. 5.7 is the average. For this, the post scores were 2, 2.7. So much, much lower than average and very far from depression. So this is going to show up as a really great state of well-being. And then we looked at anxiety. Above 8 is considered as an anxious person. The average in the US is around 6, so almost anxious. For the participants, it went basically from 4 to 2. So very, very far from anxious. Even before the program, people were better than the US average in terms of anxiety, which again may reflect their previous initiations and their connection with this enlightenment ecology, and then went up to around 80 afterwards. So 80 is a huge sense of well-being, extremely high sense of well-being, really, really profound. And you can see again, if you look at the line graph and the bar graphs, everything's just going up. So really a profound sense of well-being from participating in this program, and both statistically significant and clinically significant. The SF36, this is a very complex scale. It gives 9 total scores around physical and mental health. Again, the higher is better. We did just a paired, particularly the mitochondrial assay. You'll never see anything like that. And all the other changes, the stem cells, the telomerase activity, the gene expression, and then these changes in mental health. So to better understand that, a lot of science has been done with Swamiji, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Parameshivam. So I'm going to talk about a few scientific studies. First, they found complete control over brainwave activity. He could just control his brainwaves at will. There was another doctor, a neuroscientist named Acosta Urquida from Sound Health Designs in Wichita, and this was in 2005 and 2006. And they measured studied a variable called heart rate variability, which shows variability within the heart rate that reflects, because he said there's almost no activity on the EEG as baseline. Means when he was sitting there in a calm state, the brain was just completely quiet electrically. There was very little activity, which we will posit will correlate with a low thoughts per second, very little mental activity. So he could completely kind of shut off the mind, and it would show up at the EEG level. That shocked the researcher. And then when he would go into meditation, there would be a huge surge in gamma waves, which we'll talk about shortly, the significance of gamma waves. But the key part is when he was healing, that's a goal of Vedic traditions, yogic traditions, Hinduism, and they transmit it to someone they're healing or a disciple or any other person, be like an initiation. It's putting them in the same brainwave state that's going to have profound effects on their well-being. He is doing initiations to his disciples or people visiting his ashram as well. He puts their brain in gamma waves, high amplitude gamma waves, which is a very specific kind of gamma wave that's almost never seen. So real quick primer on brainwaves. Brainwaves is the measurement of the electrical activity in the brain through an EEG, which is like an EKG for the brain, electroencephalogram. You can see delta waves are very low frequency waves from 0.5 to 4 hertz on the bottom left. This is like when you're, you can calculate them. And they've been shown traditionally in everyone's brain a little bit. When people have a stroke of insight, like the light bulb goes off, there'll be a little flash of gamma activity. But just for a second, and only when that insight strikes, which you can't bank on, right? It's like when the muse speaks to the artist, like that. It's also connected with enhanced creativity. Interestingly, it can also be created through spiritual activities and mind-body interventions. The last group I'll talk about is long-term meditators. These were Tibetan Buddhists that have been meditating for 10 to 20 years, like their whole lifestyle was meditation. Like monks that would meditate for 6 hours a day, or a huge amount of meditation. This came out in 2004 by Dr. Davidson in Wisconsin, a really breakthrough publication. When they would go into a oneness and compassion meditation, they could go into sustained gamma. That's the only other time that lines is 1 second. You can see the whole brain is in gamma. And this person can go on and off at will at any time. While they're talking, while they're doing anything, they can just do it at will. They describe intense bliss associated with that, intense oneness. I've also seen another contact us, because this is a field we're excited to dive into. A lot more research has to be done. Real quickly, some lifestyle things. I'm not going to go in detail because I'm over time already. But mind-body consciousness approaches can make this possibility of really powerfully enhanced mental health and intense states of...
Dr. Peter, what I wanted to say here is that Dr. Bloomfield talked so much about the state of space where you have fewer and fewer thoughts. That's fewer thoughts per second. And he showed quite a few brain scans which actually denote that kind of a state, right? So there is a meditation. We just wanted to play a little video about a meditation that can help you get to that state and calm your mind down. Like very often,
it should be audible now.
Nothing can be compared to the unclutching. I'll just put the whole unclutching in. Extremely powerful willpower system in you. Nothing can be. Compared. Pure unclutching. Sit straight. Close your eyes and clutch. Decide to unclutch. Disengage, unclutch from all thought process.
One technique I use is I use the word unclutch itself. Like when I observe I close my eyes, observe my thoughts. When any thought arises, I just say unclutch, which means I disengage from associating with that thought. Typically, our thought currents are one follow the other. First, I think about my house. I'm thinking about my dog in my house, and then the food the dog didn't eat, and so on and so forth. So it's an association of thoughts that creates problem.